for our students identified as multilingual learners. And I work with the opportunity funds now through the state as well. So a lot of the work that deals with policy and grants all falls in my shop. And then the wonderful Carrie Knight, many of you probably know even more because she's out and about, constantly running up and down the state, creating professional learning that's adapted to support the individual needs of all of our districts and charters. So her work is phenomenal, and you'll have a chance to hear a lot about what she does. Melissa had to jump quickly to help some of our other sessions, but we are actually starting off with a little bit of background before we hop into a little Q&A. So Melissa is our fearless support as well. So what do we strive to? We actually have opportunity to meet with our coordinators across the state, is what we call them, our multilingual learner coordinators. So every district and charter has somebody that they've named as holding this position. And every single month when we have that meeting, this is a slide that we look at and share. So we never skip it. We always center ourselves on this. These are really our priorities, and they're all intentionally connected. So we have this sort of overarching theme that you will hear us say. Carrie says it all the time in everything she does, all day, every day, and in all learning environments. So I'm going to say that again, all day, every day, in all learning environments. That is what we strive for. We want our students to be supported and thriving in every place they go throughout their day. So not just when they go to ELD and they're with their multilingual learner teacher, if that's the setup that you have, but when they're in their content classroom, when they're on the bus, when they're in the cafeteria, when their families come into our front offices. We want our families and our students to be supported. We also see along the bottom, students don't need to leave to learn. So while we recognize that many programs do take students out of the classroom, this means that they're missing something. There are times and places where that may be essential to kind of bolster a skill or to help a student with something specifically, but many of our students can remain in the classroom and thrive with the appropriate supports. So we don't feel as though students need to leave to learn. They can learn within the context right alongside their peers, and research shows us that that's where they do thrive the most. Those circles in the middle, throughout the conference, you probably and hopefully have heard bits and pieces of the Delaware Design for High Quality English Learner Education. This is our guiding work that we developed and co-authored with many of our districts and charters several years ago, and we'll be refining slightly in the coming months, but it still is our sort of what we point to and the beacon of light for all of the work that we do. And Carrie's going to dive into the guiding principles that are part of that in a moment. We're really working heavily on the WIDA ELD standards implementation. So if that's something that you're not familiar with, I encourage you, quick Google search will get you there. WIDA is the consortia that governs both our standards and assessment for our students who are multilingual learners. They recently put out a new standards framework that really aligns well with our state standards. And so this resource really pushes content and language integration, which you've heard a lot about throughout this conference, and is a tremendous resource and is something that we're really working to support our educators and administrators across the state in implementing. HQIM in the core. So if you're not familiar with HQIM, high quality instructional materials in the core for our multilingual learners. So rather than us trying to find isolated programs and resources and materials for our students, we strongly believe that your high quality instructional materials have a lot of great things already embedded within them. And then when necessary, after you really deeply analyzed those in collaboration with content folks and multilingual learner folks, coming together, looking at the materials, determining what supports are embedded already, where might my students struggle, doing some analysis, determining how you can use those materials, because we know that when we're teaching language, we need to be doing it in the context of the content, because our students are not just responsible for learning English, but they are learning their, hopefully their native language if possible, and also the content that is required for that grade level. So when we can do those two in coordination, we are going to see our students' language development thrive and our students' content knowledge thrive. We do all of this through something that we're going to talk about in just a moment, called targeted and integrated English language development. So those are the terms that we like to use to kind of contextualize a little bit of what that all day, every day in all learning environments looks like.
Awesome. So I'm actually going to jump right here, and we are actually going to connect to a lot of the things that Maria talked about, and you're going to hear about almost every one of those things throughout the presentation today. We're going to connect back to each one of those priorities. But you may have heard us talk about the Delaware design over the last 2 days, or even in the past, or perhaps you've seen the Delaware design and our guiding principles in the Padlet. We're going to talk about those today, the Delaware Design for High Quality English Learner Education and its guiding principles. But if this is really the first time that you're hearing about this, I encourage you to dig in a little bit more in our Padlet. We have a column dedicated to each one of our guiding principles. And as Maria mentioned, we are going to be digging in a little bit further and continuing to revise the Delaware design to match some of our new language, which you will also hear about today. So just kind of thinking back in the past, back in 2018, we kind of began this work. We wanted to really define for educators what high quality instruction looked like for our multilingual learners. And we wanted to make sure that our multilingual learners were being provided with rigorous grade level instruction every single day. And like Maria said, making sure that was happening across all learning environments every day, all day. So we wanted to make sure our students were being given ample opportunities to develop rich language that really helped prepare them for college, career, life, but really life beyond our classroom walls. What does it look like when they're done with school? What does it look like when they go out into the workforce and into the 21st century, like out into life beyond our classrooms? So we really began to think about what this work looked like, and we started culling research, really digging into the research in the field around multilingual learners, looking at what the experts had to say. Every piece of research that we came across really started with the very first thing that you see, and that's that all educators have to share in this responsibility for high quality grade level instruction that prepares our students to succeed. So that means that every educator in our building, including paraprofessionals, support staff, multilingual learners, teachers, content area teachers, immersion teachers, administrators, every single person in our building, everybody has to be responsible for supporting our learners throughout their entire day. And that shared responsibility was so evident in every single piece of research that we decided to make it our overarching guiding principle. So that kind of takes its own overarching piece right over top of all of those other guiding principles. So underneath of shared responsibility, our next guiding principle is asset-based and culturally relevant. And here is where our learners start to realize their full potential, and they're really empowered to navigate an increasingly diverse society and the global economy. So culturally and linguistically responsive practices really ask us to design our classroom environments to draw on our students' backgrounds. And that's culturally, linguistically, their experiential, all of their resources. So this is where we really carefully plan and explicitly deliver our instruction. So we're really planning out these purposeful interactions where our students feel comfortable exploring differences of opinions, really drawing on the resources of the classroom community, and really kind of digging into multiple perspectives. We use the words in the Delaware design called being agents of change in our diverse worlds. We want our students to really go out and to be these agents of change, to draw on multiple perspectives, to feel comfortable exploring these differences of opinion. And we have to create those classroom cultures where students feel comfortable to be part of those classroom environments. So we have to design these culturally and linguistically responsive practices within our classrooms so that students feel comfortable being in that space and taking risks. We have to make sure that we support our students throughout their entire day with rigorous grade level content area learning. So you see that second principle there. That's our next principle, and it calls upon educators to really integrate language and literacy throughout all of the content areas, because we know that language is a vehicle that drives us to deeper levels of understanding. And if you were in Carlene Thomas's session today, she actually used that image, a car image, to say that it's the vehicle. Content and language happen simultaneously. They work concurrently together to drive for deeper levels of both language learning and content area learning. So I love that she used that car example, because it's a vehicle that really drives us to deeper levels of understanding. And content and language integration is so essential for our students to be able to find success. So when we talk about our next guiding principle, assessment for learning, this really kind of draws on that principle, because we know that assessment, instruction, and learning are all connected. They're all aligned, and they really inform our student learning and progress towards grade level language and content standards. So when we can gather multiple sources of information and we can use this information to kind of refine and adjust our instruction, we can help take our learners from where they are and lead them to higher levels of understanding. And I was in Carlene's session, so I'll kind of piggyback on that. If you were there, you heard this. And if not, I hope that you listened to her recording, because she also talked about how we have to use our students as feedback. That's also a form of our own assessment, how we can listen to what our students are saying. She said students are our number one customer, and it's our job to listen to them, to get feedback from them about what we can do to help our students find success. Asking our students, what is it that I can do to help you learn better? And that's a great source of assessment for us as educators to say, what can I do to help support you? How can I help you? How can I be a better teacher? How can I refine my instruction by supporting you better? And so by asking students, that's another great source of information that we can draw upon. So just picking up little nuggets from this conference that we can attach to our guiding principles. And I love that all of our presenters today have also touched on our guiding principles and connected their work to the Delaware design and our principles. So we have to really think about all of our language domains: listening, speaking, reading, and writing. We have to use the data that we collect, and we have to provide feedback to our students. And that's one thing that Carlene also talked about in her session today, is how do we provide that timely feedback to our students to really figure out how we can help support students the best. It's not the form of assessment that's the most important, but it's how we use that information to increase effective instruction and learning. It's how can we adjust our instruction to meet the needs of our learners. And finally, as we talk about these guiding principles, we do all of this in service of building our learners' autonomy. Right? It's our job to help create independent learners, strategic thinkers, learners who are going to go out into the world and be successful. So we use scaffolds, two different kinds, both planned and just-in-time supports that are apprenticing our students into higher levels of learning. We're going to build on where they are today and where they're going to be. They may not be there yet, but they're going to get there with the right supports. We're going to support them to rigorous content and tasks as we work towards building their independence. So just like Maria talked about earlier, we have to do these things all day, every day, across the entire learning environment. And that's why we're really so excited by the numbers of educators from Delaware who attended our conference yesterday and today. So many educators from so many different aspects of education that are all really working together to support Delaware's multilingual learners. And if we're really going to move away from surviving and really begin to start helping our multilingual learners thrive, then we really all have to share in the responsibility for our multilingual learners and that high quality instruction that really is essential. So that was a quick overview of our guiding principles, but you're going to hear more about those. And I do encourage you, if this is the first time that you're hearing about those, please dig in more to the Padlet. We have a column dedicated to each one of those. And you can hear lots of resources about those and links to other things that will help support you in your understanding of each one of those guiding principles.
Thank you, Carrie. And I'm back here with the team. One of the things that has come up around this notion of the guiding principles is that they're timeless in a way, like they undergird all of the work, and certainly all of the messages in the conferences that you've held, that there are just so many crossovers. And I'm wondering if you can dig in a little bit more to that, the notion of integrated and targeted, and think a little bit more about, what that looks like, because we keep hearing, even in the Science of Reading panel and in other opportunities throughout the sessions, language development, language comprehension, how we assess learners equitably it just keeps coming up. And so the more we can kind of calibrate around this topic and notion, I think the smarter and better we'll be, perhaps. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Funny you should ask that, Melissa. Our next slide is about integrated and targeted ELD. So in ELD, English language development, is what that stands for. And, recognizing, we know what, if we were targeting another language specifically in school and bolstering that, we would just replace the E with whatever language that is. So Spanish language development, Chinese language development, Haitian language development, Creole language development. But in this instance, when we talk about integrated and targeted, we're talking about English language development. And you'll see that I have like a little equation done under there, right? Integrated English language development plus targeted English language development is how we achieve equity for our multilingual learners from an instructional standpoint. So we recognize we need both of these things. We cannot just do targeted English language development, which may be something similar to what many programs historically have done, right? Where we have a multilingual learner specialist who is holding the sole responsibility for supporting our multilingual students. Perhaps they're running around to several schools. This is a reality, and I know it's a reality still in many cases. Running around and giving some instruction to students, perhaps in a small group or pushing into a classroom, and then they're gone for a long period of time. And we're saying, yes, we have a program. Well, that's not enough. I'm going to put it out there. That's not enough, right? That is not going to support our students, because the rest of the day, the students then are not supported if we're not considering what are the language demands that exist within a particular content or lesson. So integrated English language development is the time within all of the regular classes that our students go to. Our students don't go to school simply to learn the English language. Our students go to school to learn the same content and meet the same standards as every other student. So within all of their content classes, students should be receiving integrated English language development. This means that the content of the lesson is driving what is happening. So that we sometimes use a little image of a car and we say it's the one that's driving, but in the passenger seat along for the ride are the language skills that students need. So our students need to, the slides moved. So our students along for the ride are the language skills that students need, and we need to be addressing them along the way in order to help us achieve those content objectives. So it's the standards that are driving are the content standards, but the WIDA ELD standards that I referenced previously should be coming along for the ride, considering what are the language demands, what are the genres that our students might need to know, what are the grammatical functions that need to exist within this, that exist within what students are doing. If you were in the previous session with Laura Sensi Moreno, she talked a little bit about this from an assessment standpoint and us recognizing what the language demands are. So that's that integrated piece within that. That's the responsibility of all educators. So when we think back to those guiding principles, we're considering, well, all educators are responsible for integrating the language demands within and considering what scaffolds might need to be put in place for students to access that content. And then targeted English language development is this protected time that and it can be spread across content areas dependent on student need. Every student is different, and what this looks like might be very different for everybody. But this is where we're really focused on the language skills and building up the language skills that students need in order to participate in the content. But that is important. They need to be the skills needed to participate in the content. It should not be isolated language skills that are devoid of content. It should not be a separate program that simply teaches language and a whole nother set of content for students. It should be pointing back at whatever the students need to do to be successful in the content. And in this case, driving the car are the WIDA ELD standards. Right, so along for the ride is the content, but both are present at all times. Go on to the next one, Carrie. As we talk about this, right, we kind of addressed this early on, but there are different names within federal policy. So you will see English learner used still in federal policy because it hasn't changed. But over time, as many of our presenters have talked about this, we have moved from much more deficit-based language. It's gotten a little better over time as our practices have, right? So while we still know we're on a journey and we still have a way to go and the research continues to progress, here we are finding ourselves in a place where we're using this term multilingual learner, and shifting away from English learner and English language learner and limited English proficient and limited English speaking ability through federal policy. But they have not yet changed that. So you will still see that somewhere within the policy, but we also know that federal policy, and this may have come up in several times, often lags behind, both in names of how we're calling our students, but also in practice. So sometimes policy is pushing us in a direction like where we feel that we need to have very specific, when we talk about that targeted time, often people are like, oh, from a compliance standpoint, I need to see this student that scored at this level for this particular amount of time. What I urge everybody to think is, what does the student actually need to be successful? And that's the question. And when we are making sure that the student is being successful in content and in developing their proficiency in English, then we are doing our job. So if you go on to the next one, this is just a slide that we've shared many times, but we share again for all of you to see this idea of honoring and celebrating our shift to multilingual learners. So this is a slide that we will share with all of you and allow you can use it, adapt it onto your own templates. As people say, multilingual learner, what's that? Where did that come from? Who are you talking about? This is a slide that we use to talk to that and that you are welcome to also use when you're working and talking with your colleagues. Next one.
All right, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to talk to you a little bit about our population in Delaware because it's constantly changing. Every time we pull the numbers, we notice that they are going And we don't see that changing anytime soon. So you can see here the numbers of multilingual learners that we currently have identified in Delaware. So nearly 11% of our population are identified as English learners, meaning they are in our system as receiving services. They are identified as English learners, but we also have nearly 6,500 more students that are considered former English learners in the state of Delaware, meaning they were already English learners. They reclassified and are considered former English learners. And we have even more students that were never identified, but that speak languages other than English at home. So we are a state of many, many languages. And you can see there that we have students who are newcomers, and I know it doesn't list the actual number, but we have students that are newcomers, meaning they are here speaking, identified in our system as speaking English less than 1 year, evolving, meaning 2 to 4 years, or in our system as learning English 5 or more years. Just to show you a couple of our top languages, this has not changed much over the last year, although we have lots of new languages to the state of Delaware. I'm going to show you those in just a minute. So Spanish is still our top language in the state of Delaware, followed by Haitian Creole, Arabic, and Chinese. And this one always blows me away. We may be a small state, but we are certainly mighty. And one of the things that I like to point out when we look at this, and I'll give you just a second to kind of take that in and to see all of the languages there that are represented. And I'm quite sure there's more on this list there's more students in Delaware that are not actually on this list yet. Lots of languages, they're coming so fast, and languages are changing so often that we probably have more to add to this list, but we're definitely a small state. We are very mighty. We know that our students are not a monolithic group. They are very unique. Some have just entered U.S. schools for the first time. Some were born here. Some may be learning in a dual language immersion program. Some may be learning in a traditional English language development program. Some may be dually identified as a student with a disability and also an English learner. Some may be gifted and talented. Some may speak Haitian Creole or Bengali or Chinese or more than 100 other languages across Delaware, in addition to English and or other languages. But one thing that all of our multilingual learners have in common is that they deserve an education where they can thrive. And so that's why we're really here today, yesterday and today, to really discover opportunities to make that happen. So even though we are a diverse population of multilingual learners, I really want to emphasize that we are here to help all of our multilingual learners thrive. And I'm so glad that you are here at this conference and joining us for this session. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Maria, and she's going to tell you a little bit more about some of the opportunities that we have for educators in the state of Delaware.
Great, thanks, Carrie. So here in Delaware, we just want to, we had that overarching guiding principle, and we've talked about it and talked about it and talked about it. And I think that the strength of nearly 500 people, or I think we actually are now over 500 people who have joined this conference between yesterday and today, we see the value in this and the belief that all educators share in the responsibility for high quality grade level instruction. We also recognize that we don't have a lot of folks who are actually certified in this area. There's a lot of educators doing a lot of great work, and this isn't the only way to become to have the ability to work with students, but it is one way to continue to grow your understanding through certification. In this year, we actually, I say we, but the University of Delaware, the state of Delaware, and through the university was awarded a grant to support the certification costs and courses, all the costs for up to 75 educators to obtain their certification. We thought, well, we'll be happy if we can fill all the spots. I know it's a lot to ask people to take master's level coursework because it is a 5-pack of courses plus a praxis. Hopefully we can fill every single spot. What a great opportunity. Well, over 270 educators applied for that spot. So just like we're seeing the demand in this conference, we saw this huge demand that we weren't able to meet every single person. We're so bummed about that. and continue to find other ways to do it, and hope that more people will continue to do that, and that our districts and charters will also jump on board and recognize that there is this need to support all of our educators and educators that are interested in obtaining this certification. So in the Padlet, you'll also see these there, but there are certification programs at Wilmington University, Delaware State University, and University of Delaware. Each of them looks slightly different, so I urge you to dig into those in the Padlet and learn more. Del State is having a program this summer where it's like a BOGO deal, right? Buy one, get one. They also have a leadership pack that you get your certification as a teacher of multilingual learners, as well as your administrative degree. So there are different options as you dig into each of these programs. And so if that's something you're interested in, when you go in the Padlet, take a look and dig in, and there are contact information for all of these programs.
Amazing. It's really, it's so exciting to think about how the work that you and Carrie have been able to do is expanding, and something that I work in a lot of different places and a lot of different spaces, and something that I've noticed about the way that the two of you are doing work within the department is modeling that shared responsibility. And so when we're thinking about working with our colleagues, that none of this work can be done in isolation, we think about how important high quality professional learning is to prepare all teachers to be able to understand those language demands, what to do, and reach the content. So what are some of the key professional learning opportunities at the Department of Education that you have offered for educators this year to help transform education in Delaware? And can you also speak to some of the collaborative components you've created with your colleagues at the department?
Awesome. I'll jump in on that one. So this year, we actually have spent a lot of time engaging with educators around the state and around the WIDA ELD standards framework. The WIDA standards have been around for many years, and they haven't changed in terms of the standards themselves, but the newest edition has really been revised to support a collaborative framework that supports teachers with content and language integration. There's that thing again we talked about earlier. So the new 2020 edition is really based on 4 big ideas, and you can see that on the left side of the screen. They revolve around equity for supporting multilingual learners. So the quality of opportunity and access really sets a high expectation for students while providing access for our learners to standards-based grade level content. It creates this opportunity for students to engage actively by drawing on all of their linguistic repertoires and by really using scaffolding to support their understanding in reaching those grade level expectations. It also calls for an integration of content and language, which we've said multiple times. That really means multilingual learners are developing that content and language simultaneously. And this really helps students to make meaning within and then across the content area disciplines. So the big ideas also really support this collaboration among our stakeholders. And what that does is that brings language teachers and content area teachers and administrators together and supports all of our educators in really fostering language development for our multilingual learners. So what that's done is that really calls for our experts to kind of work together to plan and deliver grade level standards-based instruction, to plan the systematic, explicit, sustained language development alongside with the academic demands of the content area. And then for each of those experts to share their unique fields of expertise, the multilingual learner teacher and the content area teacher, both sharing their expertise. So throughout this collaboration, students are the obvious target for growth, but teachers also see really a tremendous growth in themselves throughout this work together. And then the last big idea is a functional approach to language development. And we heard that in one of our sessions yesterday as well. So we think of this as kind of like a toolbox. The toolbox contains all the functions that we need for different purposes. So we make choices with the language to reflect the topic, to meet the needs of our listeners and our readers, or we make choices with language that organize our ideas to convey relationships and to think about the different types of words that are effective for a particular message. So we want our students to really become increasingly aware and very strategic about their use of language to negotiate meaning and to achieve their purpose in different contexts, in various contexts. So this is kind of how those 4 big ideas work together. And the department has really worked with districts and charters around the state to implement those WIDA English language development standards and the framework. So we started with a team in a specific content area like math or in social studies, and we had multilingual learner teachers and content area teacher specialists, along with paras and administrators or coaches in that particular content area. And we worked with a particular unit, thinking about what the goals were for that content area unit. And we worked to unit plan, thinking about what is it we want our students to know by the end of that unit? What do we want them to know and be able to do? And what are the language demands of that particular unit? And so the teachers worked together. They each brought their own area of expertise. The multilingual learner teacher brings the language expertise. The content area teacher brings the content expertise. And this collaboration really was not something that had previously happened in a lot of these spaces. So the teachers are working together. They're talking about the language demands with high quality instructional materials. And they're really talking about how to amplify the language to meet the needs of the learners. And so in addition to thinking about this with the WIDA English Language Development Standards, WIDA's also offering lots of professional learning this year. So we have all of that collaboration going on within the districts, but we also, if you kind of look at that bottom left-hand side of the screen, WIDA is also offering a lot of professional learning this year around integration within the content area. And remember, we talked about one of the big ideas and one of the big themes to this in today's conference and a lot of our sessions was content and language integration. So WIDA offered some self-paced offerings, which always has a great, it can always be alluring for educators because you can take those from the comfort of your own home anytime you want. But we also know that we need collaboration as educators. We need to come together with other people to learn from our colleagues. So one of the things that we did at the department is we crafted these self-paced offerings and we turned them into these collaborative PLC offerings. So with the help of a colleague, one of our English learner, multilingual learner coordinator specialists, we crafted some offerings into some courses that we could offer educators around the state, around working with newcomers, around working with long-term multilingual learners, around supporting multilingual learners in mathematics and science and social studies, thinking about how do we amplify language in those content areas of mathematics and science and social studies. And we had these amazing PLC formatted courses where teachers could come together and learn about how to amplify language, but then also collaborate with educators around the state. So these courses became great resources for our teachers to not only learn about how to teach multilingual learners and enhance the academic language of those content areas, but really became a great way for them to collaborate with their peers. Great place to share challenges and to talk through solutions, to share some of their big ahas and their wonderings, to really pose questions and to learn about great resources. So these were really the best places to be after school if you wanted to learn about your multilingual learners. And we had so much success with those educator sessions that we decided to create a year-long cohort similar to this for leaders that's going to begin this summer. So we're going to have an administrator course that's dedicated to supporting equity for administrators and teacher leaders in building teams. And this course is going to be built in a very similar fashion where building leaders will come together in a cohort to collaborate with other leaders from around the state. It's going to kick off in June with an in-person live event, and then it'll be followed with monthly virtual sessions throughout the year. And we're really excited to bring this level of collaboration to our leaders because it's going to focus on walkthroughs, leading for equity, connecting with parents and community, and really building a strong teacher team and so much more. There's so many amazing sessions. And so if you want more information about this, you can actually ask your multilingual learner coordinator in your district or your charter, or you can even reach out to us after the conference. But more information about this is going to be coming. But we had so much success with the educator version of this that we're super excited to launch one specific for our building leaders and leader teams in our districts and charters. Okay, one more thing I wanted to tell you about before I turn it over to Maria to tell you about amazing other things happening. One of the other initiatives that we're really most proud of in our work is also SIOP, and you can see that Delaware version up there in the right-hand corner. Back in 2018, we brought you SIOP as a Delaware initiative with our Delaware SIOP model school programs. And so we're continuing to implement SIOP as part of the Delaware design. And so you can see there, we've kind of added the word Delaware SIOP there because we connect SIOP to content and language integration, and we support educators using SIOP to make content comprehensible and develop academic language, but we connect this very specifically to our Delaware design and our guiding principles. So we're continuing to provide professional learning around the state, and we're working to really build the capacity of Delaware lead teams, Delaware SIOP lead teams, who can provide professional learning in their own building. So for those of you who may not know about SIOP, it's a framework that really works with all grade levels, all content areas, all proficiency levels, and it really provides a great model for supporting all educators to share in the responsibility for teaching multilingual learners. And if you remember back to when I talked about our guiding principles, I said that was our overarching guiding principle, and that's what the research said was most important, that all educators shared in that responsibility. So SIOP is a great way to do this, and we're continuing to develop our SIOP offerings so that we can reach as many Delaware educators as possible. So please stay tuned for more information on that and how you can collaborate with some of our SIOP offerings that we're going to be starting up again this summer and into the fall for next year, because we want to get as many people on board with SIOP as possible so that we can continue sharing the great message of Delaware guiding principles and the SIOP framework to support our Delaware multilingual learners.
Carrie, there's been a lot of interest generated around the leadership, WIDA leadership offering, and we were wondering if that's in PDMS or if there's a link to that where.
That is currently not in PDMS. That is something that you will need to reach out to your multilingual learner coordinator. At this time right now, this is available to building leadership and people who are working in a teacher leader capacity. So people who are supporting a leadership role, potentially instructional coaches and people who are helping with walkthroughs and other things in their building related to leadership capacity. Maria, I don't know if you want to jump in on that or add anything to that. I tried to.
Is there a place yet? I don't think registration has opened yet. We were just at sort of in an interest phase right now, and it will be kicking off at the Policy and Practice Institute. So if you are interested, that's sort of like a first entry point where you'll get a lot of the grounding information, but you can certainly follow up with Carrie and myself if you or somebody you know is interested. And we are asking for there to be like sort of a team approach to that. So it's not just one individual or a teacher in isolation, but rather like a building level leader, a district level leader, and other folks who are supporting the class, people who are really doing the instruction.
Fabulous. I know you have another piece that you're just about to jump into. Can I just ask one question here about something Carrie said and something that you reminded me of just now? In addition to all of the professional learning offerings, Carrie and Maria have been intentional about working with their peers in both the math department and the ELA. You saw the science of reading yesterday, and then you heard from districts around Delaware during the educator showcase. And if you were not present at that session, we highly encourage you to watch that recording about their sharing of the implementation of high quality instructional materials. This is the hands in the middle is what really reminded me of this, where there's this shared responsibility, and the high quality instructional materials really offered and offers to this time of equal playing field in a way where everybody can come with their expertise and their thoughtful lens, both content and language, and really work together. So there's just a little shout out to those who participated in that panel, and for those who continue to do that work, both through initiatives you launched with ELSF, English Learner Success Forum, and with the work that you're doing around the science of reading with elementary ELA. So kudos to you and your team to like pull that content area and language component together. It's a model. It's modeling the way for many states right now.
Thanks, Melissa. Well, I think that's really something it's taken time for all of us. We all have our own worlds, and it's easy for us to continue on the path that we've always been on, which is pretty siloed, right? Where Carrie and I are off doing our work, our mathematics folks are deep in their work, and our ELA folks are deep in their own work, and we, never shall the paths cross. We had a district that we were working with recently say we finally no more conversations in the hallway, right? And if you've worked in multilingual learner education, you've had plenty of conversations in the hallway. And so trying to stop the conversation in the hallway and really be intentional about the work that we're doing is important. And so, it's not easy to put something to the side that we've loved forever and say, okay, let's sit down together and do this, both equally coming to the conversation with a little bit of vulnerability, because maybe I don't know the content and your materials really well, and maybe you don't really know English language development really well, but how do we just kind of put all of that up in the forefront and say, okay, how do we center our students and think about what's best for them? So, at the department, it's taken us time to figure out where that space is. It's not your work and my work, it's our work and our students. So I think this year we've really made a lot of strides, actually using things that are coming down the pike, whether they were in our control or not, like the science of reading work and the legislation that's happened has pushed us into these conversations where we've had to examine more closely what we're doing in that space. We barged into the mathematics world and the high quality instructional materials world to support district and charter leaders in thinking about their mathematics instruction and what this looks like for our multilingual learners and providing that collaborative space. So really, really important. Carrie, if you go to the next slide, I just want to talk quickly about a couple of things. I said Carrie has all the fun, right? I told you that when we started this session. Carrie gets to work with our educators on a regular basis, do professional learning, get out into schools. I have the less fun role, but I still love it because it does have an impact. And I said I do policy. So a lot of the work that we're doing that I have, my workload really deals with things like building educator certification, our opportunity funding. So as you know, opportunity funding came to our districts and charters several years ago, and it has continued to increase every year. This year, the total amount that was given to our districts and charters was $38 million. So of course that's spread around. It's done by a per student amount for students who are experiencing poverty and our students who are multilingual. And this coming year, the governor has proposed that that amount increases from $38 million to $53 million. So that's a pretty large increase if it all passes the legislature, fingers crossed. And I'd like to encourage folks to become involved in those conversations about how those funds are being spent. Consider how we're building capacity. So thinking back to what some of those priorities are, and this is something that I do with our multilingual learner coordinators when we meet monthly, thinking about those priorities, thinking about how you can build those collaborative structures, the time for the collaboration, the time to dig into your instructional materials collaboratively if you need a professional learning support. These funds are highly flexible and can be used in a variety of ways. They can be used to support educator certification. So we saw those numbers where we had only 75 spots and 270 educators. I encourage districts and charters to and building administrators who maybe are involved in that process to consider providing a pathway for more educators to obtain that certification, even if they're not going to go into the multilingual learner specialist role. A classroom educator holding that certification is a tremendous asset. So those funds can be used in that way. Districts and charters receive Title III funds, and I was going to talk a little bit about that, but that's a supplemental funding line from the federal government that supports our students. And then we're digging into the strategic plan work. So coming up at 2 o'clock today, I'm getting lost in time, as you all might imagine. We will have an opportunity for anybody who's interested to engage in a focus group and provide their input into our strategic plan and our path forward for the next 5 years as a state. So this is what the DOE can really do to impact change, recognizing that the DOE really sets policy across the state and supports all of our districts and charters. We are here and our role is only and in every way to support all of you. And I see Melissa put a shout out to Renee Parsley, Nicole Marshall, Paige Morgan. These have been invaluable colleagues to our work in driving that collaboration. So we thank you for joining this session. And if you are interested in joining the Strategic Plans Focus Group, that is the last session of the day. And it is in your schedule. It was previously pinned. It is no longer pinned for everybody, just so that we have a sense of who might be joining that session. So if you are interested, if you could go into your sched, click that you'll be in that session. We will see you at 2 o'clock for that.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carrie and Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.